welcome everyone to episode number 44 of Office Hours. We've been doing this for 44 weeks. Now, not 44 weeks consecutively, because, you know, life is a thing that happens to people, especially me. I have a lot of life happening to me, but we've done it for 44 weeks. That's crazy. Welcome back. If this is week 1 for you, it's okay. You don't have to watch them in chronological order. We're less like The Wire and more like Star Trek: The Next Generation. That's an analogy. Anyway, this is episode 44 of Office Hours, and if you've never attended Office Hours before, the way this works is that at some point in the past, maybe you, but definitely someone like you, has visited my website, www.adam-koble.com. They've clicked on that little Office Hours link up at the top, they fill out the form, they recorded their question, and then I did a little bit of audio magic on the question, and now I'm going to answer it. Well, I mean, maybe not their specific question. There's a lot of questions. But yeah, we've been working through them three at a time, which means we've, oh God, math, 130. Anyway, I've answered a lot of questions. I'm going to answer 3 more today. Today's question begins with a question in an unusual form. Scroot this, my friends.
Hello, Adam. I'm a dungeon master and a voice actor by trade. I'm Canadian too, believe it or not, and I've got a pretty simple question for you today.
What are some tips on creating memorable player character interactions? I want to see memorable interactions amongst themselves and also between player characters and NPCs throughout a game. In your experience, what usually facilitates these interactions within a narrative? As a GM, I want to create as many memorable experiences for my players as possible, so it's really useful if you could provide some tips on that. Also, which game system have you found to help create more of these moments? Because I feel like those moments are what I live for as a GM.
Well, if you need someone to do a weird voice, apparently our friend Dev here has you covered. I'm going to start with what feels like the operative word in your question here. And that word is memorable. We're going to start from there and spin out. So let's do a little exercise together. Okay? You and me, audience. Let's do this little exercise. Think about a campaign of role-playing game. Several sessions strung together, the same or similar players, same game, same GM. It could be a game that you've run. It could be a game you've played in. If you're new to RPGs or you haven't played before, it could be one you've watched on Twitch. Think about a campaign that's stuck in your head or one that's recent, something relatively fresh. Are you thinking about it? You got one picked out in your head? Think about the moments that you remember most from those games. Think about the first powerful memory that just pops into your head from the whole game. What's the thing that pops into your head first? Now, let your memory expand a little. Let it wander around. Think about other moments from that campaign that feel significant to you. Take up some space in that memory. Remember your friends' faces. Remember the voices that they did as they described the actions of their characters. Remember the room that you played in. Remember the table, the walls, the lighting, the other sounds that were going on. Could you hear a TV in another room? Maybe someone's roommate making dinner. What moments from that campaign emerge to the forefront of your memory? What things stick with you? Think about those moments. Just roll them around in your head a little. Now, we're going to try to figure out what made those moments come to mind. What do they have in common? What draws you back to those moments in play? Is it something in the narrative? the dramatic tension of a powerful in-character moment? Is it a tense combat situation? Is it an unexpected die result on a table maybe, that suddenly changed the direction of your game? How many of these moments did you engineer on purpose? How many of them emerged organically as a result of the chaos inherent to play? Now, the reason that I wanted to ask you to do this, the reason why I wanted to take a little walk through your collective memory palaces together, is because I think that memorable moments in games are both highly subjective and highly unpredictable. In fact, I think a fun thing that you could do would be email or text message or call or Discord group chat with the group that played that game with you, and ask them, without influencing them, ask them what they remember from the game. Compare and contrast. See what things people remember together and what things they remember apart. I think that most memorable stuff in role-playing games can't be engineered. I think memorable moments come from randomness, the unexpected. We like to be surprised. We play to find out what's going to happen. And if we engineer that, it can be very difficult. Now, I'm not saying that it's impossible to avoid all memorable moments tied to randomness, but I think that just the nature of the game and the history of it means that we associate power, narrative power, with that chaos. And it's not just from the roll itself. This isn't just from the like, oh, we got a 1 on a D100. This is a big deal. It's from the tension that chaos creates. It's from knowing that randomness lurks under the surface of every moment of our game. From the actual chaos itself, and then from the frantic and often powerful response we have to it, that comes from being built up, waiting for it to happen. I mean, look at every big serious crit, or just the right roll at just the right time when all the chips are down. Look at those mechanical moments that feel visceral, right? We act in accordance to that chaos and chance. We're surprised and delighted when the rules get to play a role in stirring up our game. I don't think that we can underestimate how powerful those moments are in making us attach to our games. Now, it's not to say that all memorable moments come from chaos in the rules, but I think that something powerful is buried in the way those rules work. What we find memorable is often an after effect. And I think the thing to remember here is that before I get into answering the actual question, because I will talk a little bit about engineering things that feel significant to play. Sometimes what's memorable isn't clear or obvious until the game is over. In the way that the themes of a game develop, sometimes you don't understand the relevance of a moment, right? So you have an interaction with a person, and in game, you have an interaction with a person in game, and you say, "I swear to you, I will avenge your brother's death." That moment can be dramatic and intense, but it's the avenging of the death. It's the writing of that new chapter that at the end of our campaign feels memorable, right? We can't engineer a moment necessarily with the intent of being memorable. Now, we can do certain things to increase dramatic tension. We can do certain things to create a sense of meaning, but it's not going to happen on purpose every time. So let go a little bit of that. Because I think that if we play to find out what happens, we can also play to find out how we feel about it. And every game develops its own in-jokes. In-jokes are what we used to call memes, kids. Trying to force an in-joke is like... It's like trying to make new slang happen, or trying to stick a nickname on someone that no one wants to pick up. Sometimes stuff just doesn't stick, and aiming to create memorable moments can often backfire. right? So the first step here might be letting go of your desire to make moments that will endure, right? Play the game well. Throw your heart into playing the game and expect the same from your other players. That's going to make the game feel memorable, whatever your memories look like or whatever their content ends up being. You don't want to be the Gretchen Wieners of your group. Now, encourage players to interact in a way that illustrates their character and shows us who they are, or at least that's something you can do, theoretically. Because what ends up happening is you have to look at your game. Does the game you're playing encourage this kind of behavior mechanically at all? Because what you want is to have those moments that you can look back on and say, do you remember when we had that conversation? Do you remember when you said this thing? Do you remember when you and that NPC got in that argument? You want to be able to look back and have the players all say, yes, that was a moment. And your game needs to support you. Does the game reward players for their interaction directly? Like you get XP for having character moments. Maybe you get advantage for having in-character moments with the other characters. I'm thinking West Marches here. It was the solution that came up for West Marches was to grant advantage on people revealing their character's background to the other characters through a scene. It was a very sort of indie RPG, like mid-2000s technique, right? It was just stolen from that school and placed into the game and created a mechanical reward for behaving that way. That's a direct reward. Does it reward them indirectly? Like maybe they just have a stat they can roll, or there's just a thing on their sheet that says, I don't know, they're objectively chaotic or objectively good, and they might want to express that. In the same way, you would want to express that you have blue eyes or that you are an elf, right? Indirect rewards, just playing your character. Now, if it doesn't have any of that stuff, you're going to have to bypass the game's rules and talk to the players instead. You're going to have to offer them, we're going to get feelsy. Hold on to your feelings. All right? Get ready. You're going to have to bypass the game and talk to your players and offer them a much less game-based reward. And that reward is your positive emotions. Someone else's good feelings as a reward in my game? Ridiculous. In my day, we had gold. Experience points. It was good enough for us, right? Good feelings aren't a reward in a game. The +1 sword is a reward. Right? Gaining a level is a reward. But hear me out. The game you're playing doesn't say anything about players taking on the role of a talking giraffe. One of your players comes to you and says, hey, GM, I would really like to play a talking giraffe. But I really, really, really want to, even though I know it's not in the game. It won't affect my stats. I'll use the same stats as a elf. Can I please be a giraffe? It would mean a lot to me. So what informs your choice? What do you do when your player comes to you and says, I want to be a giraffe man? What do you balance, right? On the one hand, it's your ideas for the game, right? Do giraffes fit into your campaign setting anywhere? Can you make space for them? Will this upset your plans or intentions? Do you have a personal problem with long-necked ungulates? You have to balance that against the desires of your player, because saying yes to Giraffe Boy is going to make him very happy. And he's your friend, right? And you want your friends to be happy because their happiness makes you happy. You're not a psychopath. You can feel empathy for other people. It's the same deal here. You as the game master can say to your players, it would make me really happy if you would treat your characters and the NPCs in the world as if they were real, and that if we took time together to learn about them through characterization, that would make me happy. The reward for fulfilling my request is my happiness. And you're my friends. You care about me. Right? So that's the thing. You've asked your players for something that you want, and your players will have to discuss and think about whether your request impinges on their desires, their priorities, and their boundaries. You're functionally doing all of this outside the game, but you're interacting as people, and that's important shit. This is like basic relationship stuff, right? Asking for what you need, respecting each other's boundaries, talking about it, treating each other's happiness as a reward for doing something that makes them happy, right? It's pretty simple, normal stuff. You're never, ever going to get the things that you want unless you ask for them. I promise. You'll never get this. This will not happen on its own. If you don't do something, you'll never get this. And if you want some backup from your game system, if you want to say, hey, everyone, I would really like this thing. I would like it if we could play a game where we all had a chance to discuss what we want. And then in character, I would love it personally if you all would just like interact and do cool things and talk to each other and embed yourself in your character, right? I would love that as a GM. That would make me really happy. However, you can get backup from the game by saying, to support you, my players, here are the tools that you will need to do that. Because it's one thing to say, we're playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I know that what you want is to kill monsters and get treasure because that's what the game is about, but please don't do that. Please step back from the goals of the game and do this other thing that I want. That's a much harder ask than to say, here's Apocalypse World. You have mechanical flags that say seduce and manipulate is a part of this game. Characters interacting intimately is a part of this game. I am supporting you as a game master by suggesting that my playstyle, this thing that I would like to be rewarded for, is a part of the game that we're going to play. I found that Monster Hearts, Masks, Sagas of the Icelanders, and Night Witches, just as like a few examples from the last couple of years, have all been emotionally investing. They've been intense. They've been fun. They've encouraged player interaction. I think Sagas is one of the best interpersonal relationship like games I've ever played. Same with Night Witches. I think all of those games are really amazing at creating deep character interaction. Now, you'll notice the common factor here is that they're all based on Apocalypse World because that system does complex social crap in a simple way really well. Now, I'm not even going to mention that game about the hot circle because you know I want to, and I'd like to get a whole episode down without having to recommend it to someone. But seriously, just look at the game, right? Does the game address social interaction mechanically? If it does, the game is going to back you up. Be discerning. Read not only what the game says it's about, but read what its rules tell you to do. Make sure you impart the important stuff to your players. Tell them why you're choosing the game that you're choosing. Say to them, I want to play this game because it has cool rules for this specific thing that I desire. This is exactly the same as saying, let's play Riddle of Steel because I want to have complicated sword fights. Let's play Dungeons and Dragons because I want to be a half-orc barbarian. Let's play the Hot Circle because I want to play a character whose whole focus is around what they believe. Try it out. Ask your players what they want. Tell them what you want. And find a game that will help resolve all that together. Do not try to engineer memorable moments. Play with integrity. Give a shit about your game. Demand the same from the people you play with. Giving a shit, being open to other people's desires, and playing the game as it's written, if it's the right game, is all going to lean you into that space, right? I think that a lot of the time we try to fix games that don't do this by hacking on additional stuff, and that might work. But just remember, the farther the game is from what you want, the more work you have to do. And that's okay. That's okay to do that work. You just might not want to. Speaking of social stuff in games.
Hi, Adam. This is Sithmaster from Twitch and Discord. It took me some time to formulate a question for office hours, so hopefully this all makes sense. But it boils down to two words, really. social conflicts. These are a huge issue for me, and some systems have next to nothing to do with these. I kind of throw skill checks in here, so others might disagree. Others have various attempts to work with, like Duel of Wits from Burning Wheel, Seduce Manipulate from Apocalypse World, Parlay from Dungeon World, or Convince from Torchbearer. In addition to that, coupled with various playstyles some groups may have on how they also approach social conflicts, or to what they might consider, quote, free play. This is where sometimes player character sheets really just become placeholders for play conversations with players, which may or may not sometimes have much to do with how the game actually describes their characters, their skills, stats, or what have you. On the flip side of this, having someone such as a GM saying like, it sounds like you're trying to do something in this conversation. We must roll dice now. Can really break pacing and flow for many players and really limit the kinds of conversations that are interesting and enjoyable at the table. What are some ways as a player, GM, or just a person at the table can do to address or discuss these different ideas at a game level or a table level? Are these types of ideas fixable or mutable? Or is this more of a, seems like we just enjoy different things at the table, so let's try a different game. Thanks, future Adam, and I hope you're doing well.
Well, I can't speak for future Adam, but present Adam is doing pretty good, although he's slowly mutating into past Adam, so I can't speak for him either. Time is complicated. I'm doing fine, though. Thank you, Sith Master. Let's talk about social conflict. So, in tabletop role-playing games, social conflict occurs generally when one of two things happen. Two characters want something different, or two players want something different. Now, the former should theoretically be relatively easy to work out. The latter can get complicated because sometimes when two players want something different, they use their characters to express that. So there's some nuance here. Now, the reward structure of the game might push characters into conflict. They might both be rewarded for different things, or they might be in conflict over the nature of a reward or how to divide it if that reward is fictional rather than mechanical. The character's innate traits might push them into conflict as well, mechanically. If you are sworn to destroy all humans, I might come into conflict with you if I'm sworn to defend the last human survivor. Characters, which is to say the fictional collection of stats that we pour our desire and intent into to navigate the space of a role-playing game, characters impart their characterness via the mechanisms of the game and their character sheet to the player, who then makes a choice based on those elements, some of which may be at cross purposes with another player's character. Now, players come into conflict because personal goals in a game may not match up. I might want my character to be the best, or the strongest, or the most interesting, if there's a competitive element, either of my play or of the game itself. As a player, I might come into conflict with someone else over the best way to approach an in-game problem. This, I think, is maybe the most common, where that line between player and character blurs. I want to go south, ergo, I'm going to pawn stance my character into wanting to go south as well. I want to kill the kobolds, you want to let them live. I have a personal problem as a player with killing innocent creatures. You maybe do not and see them as monsters. We use our characters to argue that kind of stuff. Players may come into conflict about the best way to approach a problem and might be discussing what to do with that problem before or during or after or in the midst of in-character mode engaging that problem. A lot of GMs will enforce this. A lot of GMs will say it's a table rule that if you have a problem or you have something to resolve, the characters will resolve it. Don't talk about it out of character, because I don't want Dave and Blue Jay to argue, I want Lane and Saris to argue, right? I want them to deal with this in character. Now, I don't obviously subscribe to that. I think that Lane and Saris have a different argument than Dave and Blue Jay might. So, you know, maybe your table does this, maybe not, but we'll talk about solutions after we figure out the problem. So players also, and I'm not saying that anybody that I know does this, but I've definitely played with players like this. Players might come into conflict over personal shit totally outside the game and might, if they're a bunch of fucking jerks, be dragging that shit into the game and use their characters as an excuse to bully each other and be mean. If your players are doing that, this is not a game problem. This is not a thing that office hours will be able to solve for you. Talk about it with them as players. Be like, look, every time that you come here after you have been at work all day, you are exhausted and frustrated, and it really shows in the game. You use your character to take out your frustration on us, and that's not fair. Have that conversation, but that's not a game problem. That's a player problem. Players who are in conflict without touching the fiction are not your responsibility as the game master. They're not the responsibility of the game, and they're kind of out of the scope of this question. So don't play with jerks, or if you are playing with people who are acting like jerks, talk to them about it. Players in conflict whose characters should ostensibly not be in conflict is an awkward mess. Characters in conflict whose players are not in conflict is a fucking awesome, exciting way to create tension in play with the right supports. When I say, all right, John, your character wants this, my character wants a different thing, I want the same thing as you. We both want this game to be fun and interesting. Let's play our characters and get in character debates. Let's have a fight, right? Generally, when you get into a situation where two characters want something different, there are two approaches. Well, three if you count murder, but murder isn't a social conflict. A lot of games end up in Murder Town, but that's because we've talked about this. We know why Dungeons & Dragons is violent. Anyway, there's two schools for social, non-murder style conflict. The most common, and maybe the one that I like the least, is this laissez-faire approach where the mechanisms just don't get involved. We've all played in games like this, where we are expected to ignore the mechanisms the game may have for us, limited though they may be, and we just RP that shit and just talk it out, right? We're like, no. You two just argue in character. And then one of you will convince the other, right? That'll inevitably happen, right? Someone will back down because every time there's an argument, someone says, no, you know what? You're right. Certainly in any argument, it never happens that both sides just shutter their argument doors and say, no, I'm right forever. Right? That never happens. That's why this approach is sort of bullshit, because you're expecting something out of the game that doesn't happen in real life. And if the mechanisms, you're ignoring them, the mechanisms can't help you. You're ignoring the fact that our characters are not us and may have tools to influence one another. Having this pure RP conversation is a bit like resolving conflict in combat in D&D by giving everybody sharp knives and saying, okay, last person in the room gets 100 experience. I mean, what's the point of having stats that indicate your character's social aptitudes if you don't engage them? Yes, it's important to give players the space to argue their shit in character, but that can't be the be-all and end-all of resolving things, or else we're just playing cops and robbers, right? Oh, I convinced the Seneschal to sign the coal mining tax reform bill. No, you didn't. Yes, I did. I totally convinced him. People like this amateur theater bullshit approach because it lets them feel like they're being immersed and like role-playing their problem. They feel like it's a success to ignore the rules. This is for immersion. You know how I feel about it. The other approach that people take is just making the dice roll the only thing that matters. This is the opposite approach. This is saying, yes, I argue my approach with him, and when I am finished with my point, I got a 20 on my diplomacy check, so like he signs the bill. It can feel really trite and kind of minimal. And like in some games like Dungeons and Dragons, this shit isn't the focus. So make it a single roll and move on. That's the right thing to do. But that's not what you want either. You want social conflict to feel like it has some teeth. So either do what your game gives you, or do a different thing with a different game, or hack your game to do it better, right? In D&D, you are totally within your rights to say, I made my deception check, so he believes me. In fact, not letting your character make that deception check is mis-GMing that game. I like when within the bounds of the game, you can have a nice nuanced combination of the two. Like even in stupid old D&D, I like getting advantage for an impassioned speech at the right time, right? There's a difference between I diplomacy him, he does what I want, and I give a speech. Here's my speech. Speech. Now I diplomacy him. Can I have advantage for mentioning his hometown and his religion and the fact that he secretly loves me? Probably, right? I like giving advantage for smart arguments. I like giving out extra dice for smart arguments where the game allows. So you can do that. You can give the players a short opportunity to state their case. You can listen and as a group decide who, if anyone, gets the bonus. Now, don't let someone who has an interest in the results be a part of that decision, right? If this is an argument over whether or not to kill the dwarf, do not let the dwarf chime in. Unless narratively they are. What you want to do here, though, is establish from the beginning what it means to win or lose. I always try to frame social conflict with, if you succeed, what do you get? Have everyone agree before any mechanical stuff happens. So if I say, if I win, you'll come north with me to Chiseltown, and we'll fight the Yeti together. If you agree to that, if you agree to those terms, when the dice hit the table, if I win, that's what we fucking do, because you said you would do it. Now, there doesn't have to be any mechanical incentive to do what you said you were going to do, because you fucking agreed with me as a player, not as a character. The incentive to do what you said is not mechanical here. The incentive is, don't be a lying piece of shit. Right? Saying, if you beat me in this diplomacy check, I will go north with you to Chiseltown, we'll fight that Yeti, is exactly the same as saying, if you lend me $10, I will pay you back next week. Or I will pick you up from the bus station at 4 o'clock. The reason to do those things is to be a good person. That's a thing you do in your life, not just games. Something else that I'm going to tell you to do, and this is my favorite when you're trying to convince another character, is give the player you are trying to convince the ability to just, in good faith, opt out of PvP. Strash, Sean, John, and I do this in Bloodletters a lot. The question, could I convince you of this before we make the roll, allows us as players to honestly assess the situation and say yes or no. It's as easy as that. If I say, no, you couldn't convince Cantor to change his totally amazing attitude and act like a grown-up for 5 minutes, Sean nods, thanks me for playing honestly, and thinks of another way for Arcee to undermine how cool my character is. If I say yes, we roll, and we both play by the results. I don't say, yes, you could convince me to do this, then roll, then Sean succeeds, and then I say, no, I don't do it, right? Because I respect Sean as a person. We care about each other as humans. The game matters to us, and helping each other have fun and enjoy it is important to all of us, more so than getting what we want out of the moment. So you flag this stuff as it comes up. It's consenting to having someone else make a roll to change your character's mind. It keeps agency in place, it keeps authorship in place, and it's not mind control. It's easy stuff. And it's not always about saying yes or no. Sometimes it could be about, no, you can't convince me not to act like a jerk, but you might convince me not to kill this guy and just beat him up instead. Let's roll for that, right? Maybe you will. I want you to use your character to do that. You can also tell them circumstances that might change. You can say, yes, you could convince me, but not now, not in this heated moment, or not without a little bit of leverage. We tell each other these things honestly as players because, again, it's not about 100% immersing yourself in your character and pretending that they're you. It's about acknowledging that Sean and I are players and that RC and Cantor are characters, and there are 4 different things in play here, 5 if we include the mechanisms. Acknowledge all of them. Use them to your advantage. Hopefully that's going to give you some space to explore what works best for your group and for the game that you're playing. Think about the source of the conflict. Is it player conflict? Is it character conflict? Where's it coming from? Use the systems you have at hand and treat your players like human beings. Expect them to act with integrity. Sounds easy, right? I know it's not that easy, but I believe in you. You can do it.
Oh, beardy GM of greatness, I hope you have the time to answer my conundrum question, even though it's all in rhyme. I have an eager player who is a lovely chap, but sometimes during roleplay I gladly like to slap. He gets overly focused and so sure he's right. Other players try to reason with him, but it's such a stressful fight. The reasons for his action and why he's not to blame is he has mental health issues and later gets more sane. We've all had frustrating players, which we've sometimes had to drop. But have you got any good advice so his playing doesn't stop? I hope you've got some pointers and can teach me a thing or two, because in the end, he is my friend and I don't know what to do.
This question is so amazing. Obviously, both because of what the question is, but also because it was submitted in rhyme form. And you know, I seriously considered replying to this whole question in like iambic pentameter, but I thought, nah, forget it. Yo homes to Bel Air. Seriously though, kudos for being so entertaining. Between you and grizzled old man voice from question 1, I'm having a really hard time being theatrical enough to match you nerds today. I love you. Thank you so much for that. I think it's really cool that you are even in a position to ask this question. And I say that because I think a lot of the time that disruptive player, that difficult player, the one who doesn't get it or know how to chill out, can sometimes be someone suffering from like actual mental health stuff. And that can be really invisible at the table. As someone with depression, I can say that it absolutely affects my ability to play role-playing games sometimes. It can fuck with my social stuff at a higher level. It's an all-the-time thing that bleeds into the game table sometimes. And for me, that manifests as a lack of motivation to prep, difficulty engaging at the table, a desire to not play, even though I love role-playing games. I'll let you know a secret. I never, ever start a role-playing game without the feeling that I'm like hoping it'll get canceled or that someone won't show up or that I don't have to play. It's not because I don't want to, but it's because there's some fucking dark cloud of brain chemistry in my head that tells me that it's better to do nothing than to do something that I care about. So even if I'm really excited about the game, my mental health stuff can affect how I feel about the game itself. And I think that there are a lot of people in a lot of game groups suffering from mental health stuff who just get painted as the jerk, the group weirdo. They're not seen as having issues or dealing with stuff. They're just seen as being shitty and not cooperating. And that, for that person, can be so scary and so hard, especially when that kind of behavior is already so stigmatized at the table. Now, some jerks are just jerks. And I'm going to say this because I can. Some people who have mental health issues are also disruptive jerks. That's not what this is about, and it's not your place to judge. But I'm just saying that having anxiety, having depression, having any number of mental health issues does not prevent you from also being a jerk. But that's not what this is about. This is about a person with some empathy for that person in the group, that disruptive person, asking about how to help themselves be a better support for that person and how to help that person work through struggling with their issues. I want to talk a little bit about the language of this question, not the poem. The poem was beautiful and perfect. And sorry, you're a lovely cinnamon bun. I wanted to just point out the way that the text version of the question is framed. Now, I'm not calling out the language here specifically, but as a general marker, I want to talk about the idea that we deal with players that have mental health issues. That feels a little like weird and scary to me. I don't want to be dealt with. When folks struggling with mental illness, and I promise you that the person in your group is definitely struggling, when they hear things like deal with instead of coexist with or help out or support, it can be demoralizing. It can make coping harder. It can exacerbate these issues. Which isn't to say that for you, Sarah, that it doesn't feel like dealing with their mental health issues. Sometimes it does. Seriously, like depression's a fucking bummer, and I deal with those feelings all the time. And I know that my friends and my loved ones and the people in my games, they deal with my mental illness stuff too. But it's hard to hear that from people, and it can contribute to a sense of wanting to keep your illness to yourself and not talk openly about it, which I think is a big part of working through this stuff. So my big suggestion here would be I would have a conversation with this player during a low stress time when this can be brought up safely. Role-playing can get a little intense. I think that most groups have had those moments. Fuck, I had one yesterday where you're like, you can feel yourself like losing it a little, where you're like, okay, I'm starting to lose perspective on this moment. Maybe I'm angry about something that's happening in the game. Maybe a player is acting in a way that I feel frustrated by. Like, I'm about to get shitty about this. There's emotional energy, and victory or failure on the line can feel like a big deal. We can sometimes get attached to a desired outcome, and then there's rules to debate, and the whole thing can feel like a messy time to have any kind of useful conversation. So don't have this talk during the moment. Step aside before the game, between games, some out of context moment that feels appropriate for you and that person in a venue that's comfortable for both of you, and express your concern in a way that shows empathy for the player, empathy for yourself, and empathy for the other players at the table. I'm suggesting that you do this not as a game master, but as this person's friend, which you've said that you are. Just say, hey, I want to acknowledge that sometimes things get a little heated. And I know that feeling, those heated moments, can trigger stuff for you behaviorally. I know that you don't feel comfortable with the way that those moments shake out, and I was hoping that we could talk about it. I think if you haven't had this conversation already, it'll be a great place to start, because I think most folks struggling with mental health stuff, they know it's happening. You're not going to tell him anything that's going to surprise him. You're not going to let him know anything he doesn't know. He's not going to be like, what do you mean I've been unreasonable? When you reach out to this person, it's going to be an act of kindness. You're inviting that person to help you with the situation. The main thing here is involving them in the situation. People with mental health issues are not a problem to solve. Their mental health issues are not a problem to solve. They're, people. So enlisting them to help directly is the best place that you can start. Now, if this person doesn't, it sounds to me from your question that this person is self-aware, they know that they have this stuff going on, and they may be able to help. Now, if they don't know that they have, these issues going on, that's another problem. You're going to draw attention to their behavior. But keep in mind that the conversation might be stressful for them no matter what. Right? This is not an easy thing. But I think that it's fair to acknowledge your own boundaries and desires, right? You are not having fun because of something this person is doing. The source of their behavior is ultimately on them. It's not your job to fix them. Their behavior is ultimately on them, but what this is about is you. You're trying to protect yourself and your fun, and you're trying to do so in a safe, comfortable way. Something that I think would help in-game in that moment would be a way to engage some safety protocols. When things get to that awkward, heated place, having a predetermined way to vent that energy a little or put a stop to things gently can go a long way. Again, let your friend be the lead on this. Don't say, when you act like a jerk, we're going to stop the game. That's punishment. Hopefully, he's going to know what best is going to help him get out of that stuck place if you talk about it outside that moment. The way that he thinks and feels in that moment might be different. His perspective might be different, dramatically so, perhaps. And he can probably help you work out a way to de-escalate that. That's going to be participatory for him. That's not going to be outside. You're not pulling a ripcord on him. You're letting him participate in that process. I think acknowledging it with the group at large too will help, but don't do this. Don't drag them out in front of the group and have this conversation. Make sure that it's something your friend is a part of. Don't talk about the problem behind their back. Get everyone to buy in, right? Now, we wouldn't... This is the fucked up thing. We would never balk at making concessions to make our game more comfortable for people with, say, mobility issues, right? Or color blindness, or a physical need that a person might have. We should treat mental health the same way. If the group cares about this person and wants him to be a part of their fun, they will do what they can to facilitate this stuff too. Talking about this as a group can help not only solve the problem of tension at the table, but destigmatize the idea of mental health being something that we can address together. So maybe there's a way you can create some space around the things that trigger this kind of situation. De-escalate before you get to that bad place, or find a way to safely navigate out of it. If there is anyone in your group who is unwilling or uncooperative or just like being a fucking dick about this, maybe you want to ask them to leave your group. It's not going to be easy, but remaining focused on making your choices from a place of caring and empathy and involving the person in the situation rather than dealing with them as if they were an external problem, you're going to have a much better chance at success. Here's the thing. I've never really had to deal with strong influence of other folks' mental illness in a game context. I don't have a ton of experience with this as a game master, but I can say what would be good for me, right? I can speak from a perspective of my own stuff. What you can do is what you're already doing. Talk to other game masters. Connect with RPG aficionados who live a reality of mental illness, either their own or other people's, and talk to them about how they would prefer to be treated. See how folks handle this in their own day-to-day. Look at situations like a safe word in your game, or the X card, or lines and veils. And don't look at them just in terms of game content. The X card is game content related, but you can broaden it to say, if you feel uncomfortable about the tension of a rules argument, you can tap out, right? Look into the X card. It can be helpful. Think about how you can expand it to the table. The most important thing about all of this is solidarity, right? We are in this together. You and your friend and your group, but also like you and me and other GMs and everyone who plays role-playing games and like humans generally. Sharing that solidarity and experience is a way that you can learn how to be better at the things that you do. And that is fundamentally, I think, what Office Hours is about. So I hope it helps. Good luck. This has been episode 44 of Office Hours. Kind of a heavy one, right? Like lots of stuff here. But we got some silly voices and we got a poem. So that was nice. Thanks for coming, everybody. If you want to get involved in Office Hours, if you want to submit a question, you can do so. You can go to www.adam-koble.com, click that Office Hours link, fill out the form. Now, to answer the questions on the air, I do need an audio component. But if you are feeling uncertain or shy or you don't have a microphone, we have had people have ringers pop on the Discord, ask someone to record your question for you if you like. People will jump at the opportunity to do that. Use a voice simulator. That's another thing that you can do. We've had that happen as well. I've answered questions from robots. But please, like ask questions. I love reading them. And though it may take some time to get to your question, I try to answer as many as I can. So yeah, do it. Get in on that. Thanks for coming, everybody. We will see you next time.